Hello dear learners, I hope you are doing well. So in the last module, that was module 1.2 from chapter 1, that is fundamentals of testing, we saw why testing was necessary. The second part was difference between testing and quality assurance, and the third part was a difference between error, failure, root cause, defect, etc. Now in the next module, which is 1.3, we are going to see 7 principles of testing. Okay, so let's get started. So in this module we are going to, as I said, visit this, explain the 7 testing principles, which is obviously K2, because where you will be expected to recall and apply the 7 testing principles to real world explanations. Coming up, the first testing principle, which testing shows presence and not the absence of defects. So basically this means that even if you cover up entire testing, the max you can do is to find out maximum defects as possible. But even when you find out maximum defects, you cannot assure that the testing you have done the complete testing. Also, it cannot assure that the object is entirely correct. There is a possibility of missing some of the other defect, and it is not possible to perform entire testing. So that is what this testing principle says. You cannot prove object correctness, and you cannot prove that defects are not present anymore. Okay, this was first testing principle. Now the second testing principle builds on the first one. The second one is exhaustive testing is impossible. By exhausting testing means it is impossible to cover all test scenarios. So how do we decide what to test? We decide that on basis of 3 factors, which is test techniques, test case prioritization, and risk-based testing. Now test techniques we will be seeing in the upcoming chapter. Okay, but test case prioritization. So basically we have studied about static analysis, right? I told you static analysis is the basis and it will come up in many modules. So when you do static analysis, that means the analysis of requirements. From the requirement itself you get to know what are the priorities. Okay, so based on the priorities you decide what testing we are going to do. And the third part is risk-based testing. Risk-based testing means basically stakeholders have to identify the risks to the quality of system and assess the level of risk associated with each risk item. It is similar to defining priority, but here you are identifying risks and then you are deciding what to test. Okay, and in the risk-based testing we have a cross-functional team. Of course you will need stakeholders and the product owners. They perform a special type of risk analysis. Okay, going forward we will learn what are the inputs to the risk-based testing. Okay, but this is the second testing principle which builds on the first one. Now moving on to the next testing principle, early testing saves time and money. This also will be upcoming. This is very important in the upcoming chapters, especially chapter number 2. Early testing saves time and money. We saw earlier that the more earlier you begin testing, the more merrier it is for the success of the project. It is the same principle. So you have to perform static analysis and dynamic testing at the beginning of the project. You have to involve testers in the requirement specifications review. You have to involve them in the developer code making. You have to involve them in system design. The sooner the testers are involved in earlier phases and we identify defects in the earlier phases, moving ahead, it will be very easy to avoid subsequent defects. Okay, also the cost of the quality will be reduced, because at the end of the project you will have a very few failures. You don't have to debug it from scratch. So this entire approach is called shift left. This is a very important approach in the upcoming chapters. Now comes the principle 4, that is defects cluster together. it was found in most of the analysis that the small components contains many defects. It can be a chain of defects due to one root cause, and these defects lead to major operational failures. Also, what I said about risk-based analysis, so how you do it on the basis of you predict a defect cluster in which component you might identify maximum number of defects, and in reality what were the actual defect clusters. So this forms the inputs to risk-based analysis. Now comes the next part, tests wear out. If you perform the same tests again and again, it becomes nearly impossible to identify new defects and fix them. So tests wear out means it is a pesticide paradox. You have to come up with a new test techniques every time. Now in some cases like automated regression testing, this is very beneficial, where you have to continuously test one feature due to some other component got fixed. So in that case it is beneficial, the repeating the same tests again, so that we get some defects based on other parameters also, like performance, stability, etc. But it is not always good to apply same test techniques again and again. Now the sixth principle is testing is context dependent. There is no single universally applicable approach to testing. Testing has to be done on basis of context. What is context? It is nothing but the second principle that we studied. You have to identify the test prioritization, the test techniques, you have to identify risk-based testing, okay? And basically it is based on two questions: how much testing to do and how testing is done. How testing is done is test techniques. How much testing to do is based on the prioritization and risk-based. Now comes the last principle of this module, which is absence of errors is a fallacy. Now this also builds on the first principle. First principle was that testing cannot prove object correctness. This is also the same. You can find out maximum defects, but you cannot prove that there are no errors left, okay? Because chances are we might miss on any defects. It is a misconception that software verification will ensure the success of system. So only verification is not sufficient, because verification, what it does is you are just verifying if the object is being built as per requirement specification, but validation is also required, which fulfills the intended use of the object which is being developed. So this principle is based nothing but on validation. Validation must be carried out. So let's move on to the summary. First principle was testing shows presence but not absence of defects. Second principle was testing can be exhaustive testing is impossible. You have to decide on basis of risk, priority and the test techniques. Third principle was the defects. You have to identify the defects early. Early testing is important. Fourth was tests wear out, which was pesticide paradox. Fifth one was texting is context dependent, okay? Sixth principle was defect clustering. Most of the defects are found in small components that lead to operational failures. And the last one, and the most important one, was absence of errors as a fallacy, which focuses on doing validation also along with verification. So this was module 1.3. okay, I'll be posting a quick revision of this module as well on Instagram. So, and on the YouTube also, make sure you subscribe and hit the bell icon so that you get the latest notification of all the videos on all modules. Also on LinkedIn you will find the revision or quick notes or cheat sheets for each module. Thank you.